Welcome to the Iowa Department of Education's Title III webinar. This webinar will be focused on immigrant children and youth. An overview of this particular webinar will be devoted to appropriate identification and reporting of immigrant children and youth as required by Title III for all local education agencies. Specifically, the webinar will talk about the Title III definition of immigrant children and youth, the screening process and screening tool to be utilized, the identification process, and the reporting that is required of immigrant children and youth status.
The Title III immigrant definition is as follows. An individual who is age 3 through 21, was not born in any state, and has not been attending one or more schools in any one or more of the states for more than 3 full academic years. For the purpose of this webinar, state refers to each of the 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico.
Let's clarify a little bit about what that definition indicated. A child adopted at between the ages of 3 and 21 who meets the criteria is an immigrant. A child adopted prior to age 3 who has had enough time to adjust to the cultural, language, and educational differences would not be an immigrant. Children born to U.S. citizens and military personnel outside of the states and foreign exchange students are not considered immigrants.
Let's further clarify this definition. In the educational environment, a student is classified as an immigrant only until the student has attended U.S. schools for a cumulative period of 3 years. The months are cumulative and need not be consecutive. This immigrant status should not be confused with immigrant status for the Immigrant and Naturalization Service, or INS.
So what does the screening process entail? The LEA should request only information about the following related to each student: their date of birth, their place of birth, and prior school enrollment. In collecting such information, schools and/or districts should pose the same question of all students and ensure that the information is not used to discriminate against students in any way.
Additionally, to avoid what the Office of Civil Rights calls a chilling effect, the LEA should not ask a student, a parent, a guardian, or a sponsor about the student's citizenship, the immigration status, nor the date of entry into the United States. Only the date of entry into U.S. schools is able to be collected for the identification process. Such information has no bearing on whether or not the student meets the definition of immigrant child or youth for Title III purposes. The appropriate screening tool to start the screening process is the Home Language Survey. The Home Language Survey can be found on Transact, as noted in the slide, and it must be Form IA for Iowa.
So the identification process includes review Home Language Survey Form IA, as just mentioned, for their age, country of birth, and attendance in U.S. school or schools. The LEA should first determine whether a student meets the first 2 criteria of the definition, confirming their age and birth outside the U.S. Then the LEA should determine the total cumulative number of months the student has attended U.S. schools to meet the final criteria of the definition.
The reporting process requires LEA personnel responsible for entering student data to refer to the Iowa Department of Education Data Dictionary. They must report a PK-12 student as immigrant by checking the immigrant box and entering the first enrollment date in U.S. school. Reporting immigrant students' country of birth is not required for SRI reporting, but the LEA should ensure that students' country of birth meets with the federal definition of immigrant children and youth.
Additionally, in the reporting process, note that immigrant status is determined annually. Once a student is reported as immigrant, that status changes only when the 3-year limitation is exceeded. Once the immigrant student has attended a U.S. school more than 3 full academic years, The district then unchecks the immigrant box in the student information system. Keep in mind that the student's first enrollment date in a U.S. school does not change.
For additional support regarding immigrant children and youth, all questions should be directed to your district's AEA Title III consultant. Thank you for your time and attention to this very important information.